Have you ever felt an overwhelming fear of the unknown? An anxiety so profound it grips you at the thought of your own mortality. Imagine living every day with an unshakable dread of death. This is thanatophobia, the fear of death, and it's more common than you might think. But what if you're suffering from it? In this video, we'll uncover the truth about thanatophobia, what it is, why it happens, and how to overcome it. Thanatophobia, also known as the fear of death or dying, is a specific phobia characterized by an intense and often irrational fear related to death or the process of dying. It is a psychological condition that can significantly impact a person's mental and emotional well-being. Thanatophobia isn't just a fleeting thought about mortality. It's a persistent, intense fear that can interfere with everyday life. Some of the most common symptoms include anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive thoughts about death, and avoiding situations that might remind someone of mortality. Even the simple act of talking about death can trigger overwhelming distress. This fear isn't only about dying itself. It can encompass fears of pain, the unknown, or leaving loved ones behind. According to the American Psychiatric Association, while thanatophobia isn't classified as a disorder, it's often tied to anxiety disorders or existential crises. The fear of death is part of our survival instinct. It's embedded in human psychology. But when this fear becomes excessive, it might stem from genetic predispositions or learned behaviors. Studies have shown that individuals with a family history of anxiety disorders are more likely to develop phobias, including thanatophobia. Thanatophobia, or the fear of death, has been a part of human experience for as long as we've known we are mortal. Early humans, driven by survival instincts, developed this fear to help them avoid life-threatening situations and ensure their survival. In ancient civilizations, beliefs surrounding death played a central role in shaping cultures. Take the Egyptians, for example. They focused heavily on the afterlife, developing elaborate burial rituals to ensure a safe passage to the next world. Their belief in immortality deeply influenced their views on death. In contrast, Greek philosophers like Epicurus took a more rational approach, questioning whether death was truly something to fear, arguing that once we die, we cease to experience anything, and therefore there's nothing to fear at all. Eastern philosophies like Buddhism introduced yet another perspective, viewing death not as something to fear, but as an integral part of the life cycle, a necessary step in the endless cycle of rebirth and spiritual growth. Fast forward to the medieval period, where plagues, wars, and widespread suffering heightened fears of death. This uncertainty around life and death left a deep mark on both art and religion, with an emphasis on the afterlife and divine judgment. In the modern world, psychology and existential philosophy have taken a more in-depth look at our fear of death, exploring its roots and offering ways to confront and understand it. These studies aim to help us not just accept our mortality, but to live more fully despite it. Throughout history, thanatophobia has shaped human thought and culture, evolving from a primal instinct to a deeply philosophical and psychological concern. As we continue to explore this fear, we find that confronting it may just be the key to truly living. Thanatophobia can stem from several factors. For some, it's rooted in existential fear, the inability to understand or accept the concept of non-existence. Others may develop it due to traumatic experiences, like losing a loved one or witnessing death firsthand. Cultural and religious beliefs can also play a role, especially when they create uncertainty or fear about the afterlife. Additionally, mental health conditions like anxiety or OCD may amplify thoughts about death, making them harder to control. Ultimately, the causes vary, but they often tie back to our deep need for security and understanding in the face of the unknown. The symptoms of thanatophobia can be both physical and emotional. Physically, it may cause a racing heart, shortness of breath, sweating, or nausea when thinking about death. Emotionally, it often leads to intense anxiety, panic attacks, or avoidance behaviors, like steering clear of conversations or situations related to death. These symptoms can disrupt daily life, making it hard to focus or enjoy the present. Recognizing them is the first step toward addressing the fear. Psychologist Irvin Yalom, in his book Staring at the Sun, Overcoming the Terror of Death, delves into how confronting our mortality can lead to personal growth. He emphasizes the importance of finding meaning in life to alleviate death anxiety. Did you know that approximately 20% of adults experience some form of death anxiety? A survey conducted by Chapman University found that the fear of dying ranks among the top 5 fears in the United States. Interestingly, younger people report higher levels of thanatophobia compared to older adults. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, famous for her work on the stages of grief, highlighted how the fear of death often stems from unresolved emotional issues rather than the idea of death itself. Throughout history, many extraordinary individuals have grappled with an intense fear of death. These stories reveal how thanatophobia, fear of death, shaped their lives, their behaviors, and, in some cases, their legacies. Let's take a deeper look at how this fear manifested in the lives of some of the most fascinating figures in history. First up, we have Howard Hughes, billionaire aviation pioneer and one of the most famous examples of someone consumed by thanatophobia. As his fear of death grew, so did his obsession with cleanliness and germs. Hughes went so far as to wear tissue boxes on his feet as makeshift shoes and demanded that his staff follow strict hygiene protocols, handling items with gloves. But it wasn't just a matter of cleanliness. His fear of germs, or mysophobia, became tightly linked to his deep-seated fear of dying. In his later years, Hughes became a complete recluse, living in darkened rooms and avoiding human contact. He even avoided certain foods and objects he believed might carry pathogens. His mental health deteriorated under the weight of his fears, and tragically, he passed away alone in 1976. His legacy of innovation overshadowed by his tragic decline. It's a stark reminder of how the fear of death can slowly take control of a person's life. Next, let's talk about Nikola Tesla, the genius inventor who gave us alternating current, AC electricity. Tesla's thanatophobia was so profound, it drove him to explore concepts that seem almost otherworldly. He believed that through science, humanity could one day conquer death itself. Tesla's obsession didn't stop with electricity. He was also fascinated by wireless energy transmission and even life extension. But Tesla's fear didn't just shape his work, it dominated his life. His obsessive-compulsive tendencies meant he was meticulous about his daily routines, from avoiding germs to fixating on numbers divisible by 3. His fear of death even led him to avoid personal relationships, fearing they might distract him from his goal of conquering mortality. Tesla's fear, like Hughes's, left him isolated in his later years, alone with his groundbreaking ideas. Finally, let's look at Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Behind the glitz, the music, and the fame, Jackson reportedly suffered from a deep fear of death that influenced many of his life choices. Known for taking extreme health precautions, Jackson even slept in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, believing it could extend his life. His thanatophobia also showed in his obsession with youth. Jackson's fascination with Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up, symbolized his desire to escape the inevitable march of time. Despite his global fame and fortune, Michael Jackson's fear of mortality haunted him throughout his life. It wasn't enough to protect him from his untimely passing in 2009, but it certainly shaped the way he lived and how we remember him today. These stories reveal the many ways thanatophobia can shape a person's life. Whether through reclusive behavior, obsessive rituals, groundbreaking achievements, or the drive to leave a lasting legacy, the fear of death is a force that no one is immune to. These extraordinary individuals were all driven by a common thread: the fear of mortality. Yet, it's this very fear that, in some cases, pushed them to change the world. So, how can someone overcome thanatophobia? Here are some proven techniques. You'd be amazed at how facing the fear of death can be a powerful step toward overcoming thanatophobia. Avoidance often heightens anxiety, but confronting this fear can build resilience. Desensitization. Gradual exposure to death-related topics like discussing it or attending funerals reduces sensitivity over time. Acceptance. Facing mortality helps us see death as a natural part of life, easing its emotional impact. Perspective shift. It can also inspire deeper reflections on life, making the fear feel less overwhelming. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps reframe negative thought patterns about death. Mindfulness and meditation reduces anxiety by keeping focus on the present. Support groups. Sharing fears with others can provide relief and perspective, and talking with therapists, support groups, or loved ones fosters understanding and reduces isolation. Education. Learning about death and its natural role in life can demystify the experience. Death is an inevitable part of life, but it doesn't have to be a source of paralyzing fear. By understanding thanatophobia and taking steps to confront it, we can live more fulfilling lives. What's your take on the impact of thanatophobia on these figures? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the complexities of the human experience.